Now, specifically CCNA security, when we look at the description here, this is from Cisco's website. It says that CCNA security is designed to validate an associate level knowledge of skills required to secure Cisco networks. So pretty obvious there. We're going to be looking at how to develop a security infrastructure. So what are the individual tools that go on to the infrastructure, whether we're talking about the layer 2 switches, layer 3 switches, the routers, firewalls, how all of those fit together. And of course, how do we prevent different types of security breaches in the network? So that's what they're talking about here when it says we want to mitigate security threats. We want to take some sort of action either to respond to the threats or try to prevent them in the first place. Additionally, it emphasizes core security technologies, installation, troubleshooting, and monitoring of network devices. So we'll also look at the command line. How do we use different types of show commands for troubleshooting? How do we use different types of debug commands for troubleshooting? And to monitor network devices, maintain integrity, confidentiality, and the availability of data. So we'll see today when we look at what are the goals of network security, we can kind of break it down into these three different categories: the integrity of the data, the confidentiality of the data, and the availability. We'll look at what are the different risks that are associated with those three discrete points, and then what different types of attacks are there in the network, what different types of vulnerabilities, and how can we prevent this by using the different tools that are available for us in the Cisco IOS. Now, in addition to learning just the technologies, this class is also going to be focused with the specific exam that relates to CCNA security. So it's going to be the, I believe it's 640553 is the current revision, the IINS exam. And you can see the specific information there if you go to cisco.com/go/CCNA security. Now, one thing that has changed here a little bit on Cisco's website within the past year or so is that they have been moving some information from the main website over to their the Cisco Learning Network. So you will have to create a login and password in order to see what the specific information is about the exam. So you don't need any special privileges. Just as long as you create an account, you log in and you will be able to see the blueprint and then what other specifics relate to the exam. So let's take a look at this webpage here for the CCNA security, and we're going to go down line item by line item in the blueprint and kind of expand on the type of technologies that we are going to be focusing on this week. Now, as to the prerequisites for CCNA security, hopefully everybody knows up to this point, if you want to take the IINS exam, you do need a valid CCNA certification prior to that. So hopefully everyone has a basic grasp on the routing topics that were covered in CCNA, things like how the TCP/IP stack works, how IP routing works, how we can use the OSI layered model in order to apply troubleshooting or to apply verification onto the network. Additionally, here we have some network management techniques. Hopefully everyone knows what Telnet is. We don't necessarily need to know a lot of details, but behind things like SNMP or SSH syslog, we will be covering those in depth when we get to secure management techniques. And ideally, up to this point, everybody has had some experience on the Cisco IOS command line or the security device manager. If you haven't, don't worry about that. We're going to talk about in just a second here different ways that you can get access to equipment to actually try this stuff out hands-on before you get to your exam. And also, I think I forgot to mention here, if you look at the bottom right-hand portion of the screen, you should see a box there that says Class Files. Those are the slides that I have up here, but they're in PDF format. So if you look for the first one, should be CCNA Security Day 1 Intro. Those are the slides that I'm going through right now. You don't necessarily need to print out these ones, but I would recommend to download the other three portions that we're going to go through today. So if you want to take some notes when we go through the actual technologies. Then tomorrow and Thursday, when we get to part 2 and part 3 of the class, I'll post those PDFs up there as well, so you can print those out or at least download them and then take any type of notes that you want as we're going through the materials. So next here we have a list of recommended readings for the CCNA security exam. First section there is just some general networking text. They don't necessarily relate directly to security, but since CCNA and CCNA security is kind of a jumping off point for a lot of people's careers in networking, I would definitely recommend that you look up these titles, either purchase them and get physical copies, or at least get electronic copies online through a service like the Safari Online Bookshelf. So things like TCP/IP Illustrated or Internet Networking with TCP/IP, these are great references to use throughout your career. Anytime you have a question on the low-level information about how IP works at layer 3, what are the different IP options, what is the difference between the sizes of the IP packet headers, and how could that potentially impact security. So we'll talk about today, when we get to some types of attacks, what happens when you change the source or destination address of an IP packet in an attack that's known as IP spoofing. Now, if you understood how the basic TCP/IP stack worked in the first place, we would know that IP has no built-in mechanism to check, are you actually that legitimate sender? Because when IP was developed 20, 30 years ago now at this point, it really wasn't designed with security as its first goal. Basic goal was just easy connectivity. Now, next category here is CCNA security specific. Those would be the two Cisco Press texts. There's both a exam certification guide and the authorized self-study. Now, the main difference between those two, the first one, authorized self-study, goes into a little bit more detail about the technologies, where the exam certification guide is more of kind of like a quick overview or a quick reference that you may want to read before you get to the actual exam. Now, you don't necessarily need to read both of them. You could go with one or the other. And if you don't want to buy these texts, I believe at least one of them, I believe if not both, are available on the Safari online website, which is basically where you get the electronic copies of the Cisco Press books. So if you either go to ciscopress.com or safari.o'reilly.com, which is the Cisco Press publisher, you can get an account there and basically read the full text of these books and search through the content of these books if you don't want to purchase it at the bookstore, on Amazon, wherever, and then have a physical copy of it. Now, what personally I like about the Safari bookshelf is that if you're looking for some random topic that you don't exactly know what book it's in, let's say I want to look up IP spoofing, you can just go to the Safari website, type in IP spoofing, and it'll show you all sorts of different texts. Some of them may be Cisco Press, some of them may be vendor independent, that talk about these type of technologies. So if you haven't seen that before, I definitely would recommend it. And also, if you look in the back of any Cisco Press book you have, usually there's some sort of promotion code or coupon code there that you can use in order to get a trial subscription. A last category there here, Cisco Security in Depth. This would be if you want to go above and beyond what we are covering this week. First one there is the Network Security Technologies and Solutions Guide. This is actually part of the CCI Security Professional Development Series. It's written by the program manager of the CCI Security program. So it's definitely some in-depth knowledge in that book. Also, probably the best text on Cisco security that I've seen, specifically related to the ASA, is the Cisco ASA All-in-One Guide. So it talks about all the different features that you can do with the Cisco firewall, specifically the ASA device. But how does the firewall feature set work? How does intrusion prevention work? And in the newer version, all sorts of other miscellaneous features, antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-spam, that type of stuff. There's a lot of operations that the ASA can do. Okay, but in either case, both of those network security technologies and Cisco ASA all-in-one, both of those are available on the Safari website. So if you want to read just a chapter or two, you don't necessarily have to go out and spend $100 on the physical book. Now, last one here, the Cisco documentation. We will be using this throughout the week as a reference for how to configure different types of technologies and how to figure out how the different types of syntax work in Cisco iOS. And unless someone really sits down and shows you how the documentation works, or you spend a couple hours just blindly browsing through it, it is kind of confusing to figure out exactly where the technology you are looking for is actually located. So we will spend a lot of time this week on the Cisco's website going through the documentation to figure out how an IPsec VPN could be configured, or how Cisco IPS could be configured, and what's the actual step-by-step commands or step-by-step process we need to do in order to accomplish that. Now, last but not least, here the security hardware. So we want to take CCNA security exam. How do we get practice on the actual equipment before we get to the exam? Okay, there's three main ways that you could do that. Okay, first off, you could just buy equipment either for your office or for your home and build your own lab. Now, this is a very viable option. A lot of engineers, a lot of our customers do this because they may be working on CCNA or CCNP now, but a year or 2 years down the road, they know that they're going to be working on other technologies. Okay, really, the two issues with this are going to be what is your budget, and then also how much power can you support at either your home or your office. Okay, second point, a lot of people forget to budget in, and when you buy 10, 20 routers and firewalls for your house and you plug them all in, you realize you don't have enough power to actually support that, or every time you turn on your ASA, your circuits are tripping. That is definitely an issue that you need to take into account. Now, personally, I don't have any individual vendors that I would recommend you look at for purchasing equipment. Usually the best way to do this is just going to be to go to eBay. So, like anything that you buy on eBay, you just need to be wary of the seller, look at their feedback, make sure that that's not their very first deal that they're selling equipment out there. And also, what is their return policy or type of warranty? If you spend $1,000 on an ASA and it gets to you and it doesn't power on, then can you send it back to them, or is it going to be as is? Okay, the other option here would be to rent rack time from a rack time provider. Our preferred rack vendor is Graded Labs, gradedlabs.com. You can also get the link to that from our website. That's the provider that we use to host our CCIE topologies that are for CCIE security, but also for the other tracks, routing and switching, CCIE service provider, and CCIE voice. Now, personally, that's what I am going to be using this week as I'm doing my demos. I have a CCIE security rack from Graded Labs, which will support all of the Cisco iOS exercises that we need to go through. Also, there's some servers on there for the Cisco ACS, and then also for accessing the SDN. So if you go to gradedlabs.com, you can find some more information about getting the access to equipment from them. Then the third option here would be to use a virtualization software that is known as Dynamips. Okay, now, Dynamips is different than any type of router simulator you may have used before. I know Cisco Press has some simulators with some of their products that are available. I've seen some people in the past use from the Cisco Academy the Cisco Packet Tracer application, which is good for some very low-level training if you follow their labs step by step. But keep in mind, no one is going to spend 10,000 hours to write a simulation that is exactly identical to the Cisco iOS. There's simply too many features in there, too many different ways that you can apply different technologies and different syntax in order to make it really accurate. Now, what sets Dynamips apart from this is that it's basically the equivalent of VMware or Parallels for Cisco iOS. So you're not simulating the iOS, you have an actual iOS image that you would download from Cisco's website. What Dynamips does is basically virtualize the iOS bootloader. So you can run the routers on either your PC, runs on Windows, runs on macOS, runs on Linux, and then you can use that to get to the command line. You can also use it to access the routers through SDN. So if you take a look at our website, if you basically search on Google CCIE Dynamips or CCNA Dynamips, you'll see that there's lots of tutorials out there. And there's a couple tutorials that I have written on our website with some videos on how to do the installation, how to actually get it working. But if you don't have the budget for buying equipment or renting rack time, then I would definitely recommend to look into this as opposed to using some sort of simulation software. It's not a simulator, it's virtualization for